G'day, I'm Dave and welcome to my YouTube channel where I do silly things and hope they work. Now I go camping a lot and it's not always the warmest and there's not always a shower around. So I've really been missing having that nice warm shower at the end of a day of good exercise. So it got me thinking, is there a way I could build a system to heat enough water with fire to have a shower? Or even better, heat enough water to have a bath? Because what would be better than, after a good day of snowboarding, coming back, sitting down, relaxing in a hot tub, the warm embrace of water around you, enjoying the serene views, listening to the twittering of birds. Wait, focus. Let's get designing. So I did some searching on the internet for some design ideas, and most people just grabbed a bunch of copper pipe like these ones and wound it around a fire, which worked for them. The only problem is I'm heating a lot of water, which means I need a lot of copper pipe, which means I need to spend a lot of money because copper is not cheap. So I needed to find an idea that would work better for me. And as with most things in life, the solution ended up being beer. A whole lot of beer. I'm not drinking it all, I'm just using the keg.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
So my plan was to have two beer kegs. The first one would have a slit cut out of the side so that it could be squeezed together to create a smaller diameter. The second one would have a cut round the outside so that the two halves could be put round the first one. Once all welded up, this would create a water sleeve round the outside and a fire could be put in the middle to heat the water. This whole system would then be connected to a blow-up spa and I would have some form of pumping unit to circulate the water around. Now all we need to do is find two beer kegs, a blow-up spa, and learn how to TIG weld stainless steel. Easy, right? So I've never actually done this before. I've got a fry pan that's stainless steel. I'm just going to try weld it. But yeah, I'm preparing for the worst. That's a good mindset to have. Let's do this! Help him with the machine's on. Ah! Why? What is going on? Get the tip a little snippy snip. What are you doing? Oh my...
3 hours later.
Why? My welding tip and my filler rod are in the weld. Oh, yeah, that's great. I eventually got my welding technique a bit more sorted, so I went out and bought two beer kegs and got to work. The first one had to have the stands cut off so they wouldn't get in the way. I left the bottom stand partly attached so it would still stand up when I was cutting the top. Before cutting into the beer keg, I had to make sure it was completely depressurized as well.
Okay, that's not empty.
After spraying stale beer all over myself, I tried again with a rag to stop the spray. That's better. I then used another beer keg I had lying around to measure up the cut line for the top and continued grinding. I thought it was pretty funny how the bit at the top came out, so I went dancing in the rain with my new umbrella. Just kidding. After removing the bottom stand, I continued the same process with the underside. I was finding it was difficult to cut around the corner with a fresh grinding disc, so I decided to cut the slit down the side first to wear it down, then finished off the top with the now smaller disc. I realised now I had these annoying edges left over from the stands that would get in the way when I tried to squish the beer keg together, so I had to cut them off at the weld line. My plan was to squish the beer keg with a bunch of ratchet straps, but after trying and trying, I realised that my plan wasn't going to work. The beer keg was just too strong. So I did as any reasonable person would do and just upped the ante with the hydraulic press. This worked a treat, and after pressing and pressing and pressing, I finally got it to the right diameter. I then cut the extra off, and it was time to weld the seam. After lining the seam up with some clamps and a ratchet strap, I got to work with the TIG welder. It was around this point that my past self forgot that molten metal is actually hot. Just look at him. He has no idea what's about to happen.
Patchy.
Yep, that's what you get for negligence. Welding glove versus filler rod. I think the filler rod won. Oh dear. Injuries aside, I got back to work and finished up the rest of the weld. Just finished welding up the seam. It's not pretty because I'm a novice, and yeah, so it doesn't look like the nice ones in the photos, but it's welded. So we'll see how the weld penetration is, I'm not sure. But I've got it down here, the other barrel, and you see, it fits quite nice and snug inside there. It was now time to tackle the other keg, which would make up the outside of the water heater. For this, I once again had to release the leftover pressure, and this time I managed to not get stale beer all over my face. So that's a plus. I then measured up the cut lines for the top and bottom so that everything would fit together snug when it was put together, and got to work grinding. This took a while, so I didn't bother recording the bottom half. I then made a cut all around the outside of the keg so that it was in two halves. It was then time to figure out the inlet and outlet pipes for the heater. Conveniently, the kegs have a length of stainless steel pipe inside them, which was perfect for the job. They just had to be cut and ground to shape. I then marked out the profile on the keg and used the grinder and some files to cut the hole to shape. Then it was welding time. I then did the exact same process to the other half of the keg for the outlet pipe. At this point, I put it all together to see how everything was fitting. I knew from the start I would have this gap between the inner and outer sections of the keg, so I measured it together and ground that amount from one half of the keg. After doing a final fitment test, it was then time to weld everything together. I first made small tacks along all of the joints so I could undo any of them if something wasn't sitting properly. The only trouble I had now was lining up the outside weld because I had these annoying gaps between the two sides. I once again had to resort to the hydraulic press to squish everything in line while I was making the last welds. So we've done all the welding now around all the seams. I'm pretty confident with all of them. They look pretty good. So we're going to take it outside and we're going to run the hose through it and see if it leaks. If there are any leaks, then I can patch them up now. But I'm feeling pretty confident about this. Let's go do it. My confidence was short-lived. There were leaks everywhere. So I marked out the leaks, ground them back and re-welded them. This process had to be done over and over again and was probably the most tedious part of the build. I had to go back and forth between the welder, the hose and the grinder. I eventually figured out a way to fill the top with water and use compressed air inside the keg to make bubbles through the holes, which made it easy to see them. So now that we've got it all waterproof, there's a few things we need to do to make it work as a fire. And one of those is to put a lid on it with a chimney so it draws air through the fire. Now this lid is also going to have to hinge because we want to put wood in the top of the fire. And for my purposes of transporting it, I also want to be able to flip it upside down and refit it so that the chimney is inside when we're traveling and then be able to remove it and flip it the other way for when it's being in use. So for that, I have bought a hinge from Bunnings, it's a fairly large hinge, and a lock pin. And I'm hoping that the lock pin I'll be able to put inside the hinge instead of this hinge, the pin they've got in at the moment, and use that as a pin, and then when I'm not using, I can unlock the pin, pull it out, flip the lid upside down, and then put the pin back in again, lock it up, and it'll be ready for transport. So we're going to have to grind this pin out of the hinge we've got here and see if this one fits. Let's get grinding. I managed to find an inflatable spa fairly cheap secondhand, and I was keen to try out my water heater for the first time. So I used some radiator hoses and pipe connections to link my water heater in with the original pump. I also used a foam yoga mat to insulate the outside of the water heater. So everything's set up now, I'm really excited. We've got our spa, we've got our water heater, and we've got our pump to circulate the water through. So we're going to get chopping some wood and then use good old MAP gas to get this bad boy going. The fire's now going and our pump is pumping. The readout on our pump down here is showing 11 degrees Celsius for the spa water. So it's got about 25 to 30 degrees we need to heat this up by, and it is around 650 litres. So it's a lot of water. We're just gonna have to wait and see, but hopefully by the evening, we'll have a nice hot spa to jump into. So it's now been 3 hours since we put the spar on, and it's sitting in a nice warm 38 degrees Celsius, which is pretty good. We've got about a 10 degree per hour heating rate, which for 650 litres is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So it's now time to kick back, relax, and enjoy my work. So that's just about it for today's episode, guys. I hope you've enjoyed watching. I've really enjoyed the process of making this heater, and it works really well. The inflatable spar is also great because it insulates well, so after using it the night prior, 12 hours later, it'll only have lost around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, which is really great for weekends because I can heat it up on Friday, then use it Saturday, Sunday without using too much wood. There are a few more things we need to address before I can go and use it camping, such as getting it to work off-grid and also getting water into it in the first place, since there won't be a tap out there to fill it up from. But that we'll address in the next episode. But for now, if you've enjoyed watching this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay creative.